Good morning, YouTube. Today, we're going to talk about financing supercars.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan, and this is my garage, and this channel is all about the supercar ownership experience. And we have a dealership, NG Supercars, in which we've sold many supercars. And one of the things that happens frequently when we're selling these supercars is, of course, people finance them. And there's all these people out there on the internet who say stupid things like, oh, if you can't afford to pay cash, don't buy a supercar. Don't buy a Ferrari if you can't pay cash for it. I love the one that's like, if you don't have at least 3 times the value of the car in cash, don't buy the car. There's no hard rules on this. There's definitely some good ideas and some bad ideas. So let's talk about this, and let's talk about with respect to today. So I've done similar videos in the past, and honestly, it's different advice today than it was years ago. So back when interest rates were super cheap, I actually bought my first Ferrari, I think at like 1 point something percent interest. When it's that cheap, when interest rates are that low, finance as much as you can. That's my personal advice. I just feel like that's free money, and frankly, you can do all sorts of other things. I mean, if you took that same cash and just threw it in a CD, you would have more money at the end than if you had not financed the car. That's one of those things where it's kind of up to your personal preferences. So let's discuss what is it like today and what are some of the things that you have to do in order to get financed today. This question actually was brought up by a viewer, so thank you for asking me to do this video. They sent me an email and said, hey, can you talk about the finances related to these cars because people have it all wrong? And so that's what we're doing today. The most simple equation when we sell a car is someone just says, hey, I'm gonna buy it in cash. And they send us a wire or a cashier's check. That's the only forms of payment we take. Well, I mean, some people actually literally physically bring cash. I don't know, whatever. Okay, yes, we can take a giant briefcase full of cash if necessary. But wires are much better, and cashier's checks also work, although we do have to verify the funds in the cashier's check before we can let you take the car. So honestly, wires are the best. But that is not always the case. And in fact, actually, I would say it's less than half the time. In fact, it's probably only 25% of the time that people are actually buying the car 100% in cash. And there's all sorts of reasons for it, and we'll go over some of those reasons. When people are financing these cars, there's a few hiccups that you can run into. So first of all, a lot of the traditional banks will not finance the cars because of their age. So for example, the car behind me is a 2006, so it is over 10 years old, and some banks just straight up will not finance a car if it's over 10 years old. Some banks don't care. It's different. You have to talk to your bank. Another thing to consider is the down payment. So how much of a down payment will you need on the car? Well, again, varies bank by bank. Generally speaking, I would anticipate a 20% down payment. That's kind of the usual thing we're seeing. Once in a while, it'll only be 10%. Occasionally, we've seen 15%. Most of the time, it's 20%, and once in a while, we've seen it be as much as 25%, or even in a few cases, we've seen it be 50%. Now, obviously, there's other factors that come into play on the size of the down payment, credit score being a huge one of them, the age of the car, the value of the car, total cost of the car, all those sorts of things come into play. Personally, I've financed these cars through a credit union that we use here in, it's only operating in Texas, University Federal Credit Union. We've probably referred 30 or 40 people to them over the years. I always laugh because here's our friend who works at this smaller bank, and he's probably financed more Ferraris than the entire rest of the company combined. Some people just gotta be like, what in the world? Like, what have you gotten into? But anyway, that is actually one of my top recommendations is find a local credit union. They typically have the best rates. Now, that's not always true, and a lot of credit unions, again, they just won't deal with these cars. So they don't like the age of the cars, or they don't like the value of the cars. Some just straight up say they won't lend out more than $100,000. We've seen that happen a few times where someone bought a car that was like $160,000, but the bank would only finance $100,000. So they had to put down $60,000 just to get the car through the financing. So if you're not going to pursue a credit union, or if the credit union doesn't work, or for whatever reason it doesn't, that's where most people start going to normal banks, or actually what is most common with us is they go to specialized banking services. For example, Woodside Credit. So we've sent a lot of people to Woodside. In fact, if you need to get a loan through Woodside, we got a guy. Actually, it's a girl, but we've got a girl. And she's helped out a ton of customers of ours. So reach out to us if you need to get in touch with her. If you're buying a car, whether or not it's through us, it doesn't have to be, but obviously she knows us very well. So when you buy a car through us and you finance through Woodside, she can just make it happen really quick. Woodside, I'm just going to use them as an example because we've dealt with them so much. So they have certain requirements, and actually it makes me feel more comfortable because they actually make us as a dealership jump through some hoops. For example, they make us provide proof of the car's mileage, of the car's condition, the fact that it can drive, it can start, it can operate correctly. So we actually have to send them videos and pictures and stuff straight to the bank to make sure that all these things are true about the car. Now, they are specializing in these supercars and stuff, so they know these cars very well, and they have very interesting rates and terms for these cars that also make it kind of appealing. And that's one of the big things is if you're financing a large amount of money and you have a short duration loan, the payment can be huge, absolutely massive. Sometimes we've seen people taking out loans that their payment is more than their mortgage. Woodside offers loans that are up to 10 plus years long at reasonable rates. So obviously that's the biggest thing right now is rates have gone up tremendously. So the 2% and whatever below rates just don't exist anymore. In fact, you're barely ever seeing anything even in the 5% range. Most of them are in the 7 to 9% range now. Whether or not that makes sense for your personal finances to do a rate like that is totally up to you. And frankly, it's not my place to say. But there's a lot of people who say, oh, never finance. Why are you giving the money to the bank? Well, the thing is that people don't understand is a lot of people can use that cash to generate money in other ways. For example, me personally, I always want to finance as much as I can because I can take that cash and do things with it. For example, I can go buy and sell more cars with it. I can use that money to grow my business. All of those things end up making me far more money than the interest that I would be paying out in a bank. It always makes sense for me currently. Like obviously if the rates get too high, then that's not necessarily true. But even at 10% interest, I can almost always take cash and make more than 10% with it per year by using that money in my business. Now, that's not always true for everyone, and maybe you don't have a business to invest in, and I personally wouldn't gamble on the stock market because its annualized rates average out to something like 6%. It kind of depends where you're at, but right now, that's where I'm at, and so that's what I would prefer to do. And I think a lot of people are in that same boat. So they also want to finance whenever possible with as much money as possible, with as small a payment as possible, because honestly the interest doesn't really matter in those cases. So the requirements to get some of these loans vary greatly. Again, I can't go over all the different things, but generally speaking, you're going to have a pretty good credit score to get these sorts of loans. Another thing is you have to have a reasonable loan history. We've run into problems where people haven't had very many car loans or car notes in their life, and so the banks just didn't want to finance them, especially this large dollar amount. Other weird things that happen is, for example, we've seen insurance providers won't insure you for your first supercar, but if you've already owned a supercar, they'll insure you for the second one, and so on and so forth. Same thing with banks. Some of them don't want to be the first one to do the supercar sort of stuff. It gets kind of tricky. You got to look around, shop around, make a lot of phone calls and stuff. What I would suggest is if you're trying to get serious about buying one of these cars, you probably want to start talking to a bank now and figure out things before you make an offer. If someone comes to us and they make an offer and they say they're going to finance it, we're fine with that. Like, we don't really change our price, whether it's financed or cash, unless of course it's going to be an absolute pain in the ass for us. We get asked, do we get a kickback on financing? And it depends. Some of the banks we do, honestly, yes, we do get a small kickback. Most of them we do not. So we don't really care. And we don't push people one way or the other because ultimately we're just trying to make money on the actual sale price of the car and the margin that we have there. If we make a kickback from a bank or whatever, I guess I don't know if that's the right term, but a referral fee, I guess is probably a correct term. If we get any of that, it's just bonus for us, and it's not substantial amounts of money. We're talking hundreds of dollars, not like tens of thousands or some huge percentage or something like that. Most of the banks are pretty much the same to work with. Some of them have us jump through more hoops than others, like I mentioned before. I kind of feel more comfortable that those banks are doing their due diligence and not trying to make stupid purchases or fund stupid cars. What can I say? I'm just the car sales guy. I'm not the banker. If you're negotiating on one of these cars, if you say, hey, I'm an all-cash buyer, does that allow you to negotiate harder? Sometimes. In our case, if you tell us that you're going to be able to make a very simple transaction with not a whole lot of hoops to jump through, and it's going to be quick and you're going to pay cash, then yes, we do prefer that because it is easier and less paperwork and less work generally on our end, and plus we can get the car off the books sooner. Now, at the same time, if you go to another dealership, will they want the same thing and be able to give you a better deal for cash? Not always, because sometimes they really push you to do in-house financing. In fact, they would rather you do in-house financing. So there are some interesting in-house financing options through some of the other companies. We obviously don't do that. We don't have any interest in doing that. But for example, if you buy a Ferrari from Ferrari dealership, Ferrari Financial is pretty interesting. They do some really wonky stuff that's not typical in the industry. For example, they don't really put the car on your credit. It's a kind of off the books loan. So they kind of figure out you and your finances and all that stuff, but they don't necessarily report it to the credit agency. And part of that reason is because you might end up with this huge debt to income ratio, having cars that are multiple six figures on your credit report. They kind of know how to work with their customers, and that's actually pretty savvy on their part, and I commend them for that. Obviously, we can't do that because we don't have a giant pool of money to work with, but that's pretty unusual. The vast majority of these companies are, of course, reporting to credit agencies and things, so debt to income and all those sorts of things come into play. I can't go into all the details, but basically the short version of the story is if you're buying one of these cars and you want to finance it, which is completely reasonable and normal. In fact, it's more than 50% of the cases is people are financing them. Probably should expect somewhere around 20% down. You should probably have enough income to cover the payment pretty easily. I personally don't think it's a big deal if you're financing these cars. I don't see the big problem because for the most part, they're not a severely depreciating asset, and in many cases, they're actually an appreciating asset. So it's not like when you're going out and buying a brand new luxury car like a BMW and you drive it for 6 months and it's worth half of its value. Or, like my wife's Mini Cooper is probably worth half of what we paid for it and it's only 2 years old. These cars tend to hold their value very well so long as you're buying the right car. If you're buying an older one like these, the 430s, probably aren't going to lose much money, so honestly paying a little interest on it isn't necessarily such a terrible thing. So again, if you're interested in buying any cars through us, check out ngsupercars.com. If you need parts for your supercar, check out normalguysupercar.com. We do appreciate when you guys can support us. But if you have any interesting topics or things that you'd like me or Josh to talk about, feel free to put those in the comment below, or you can send us an email, sales@ngsupercars.com, and let us know what you're thinking about. If you need some advice or whatever, we still offer consultation services. So yes, even though we are selling cars, we still help people buy cars through other dealerships. In fact, we go inspect cars for people too. That is a service we offer. So if you have a car that you're trying to buy and you want us to look at it, it is not a true PPI because we are not technicians, but we will basically... end of the story is we'll give you our opinion of yes, you should buy this car, or no, you should not, or yes, you should buy this car, but. So those sorts of things we help out with. Again, reach out to us, sales@normalguysupercar.com if you'd like to use any of our services like that. But that's going to do it for this video. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next video. So please like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned. It's going to be sweet.